Well, welcome along to the A Trip to the Moon podcast. My name's Matt Jones, and thank you for joining us on our emergency podcast as well. Appreciate the timing isn't ideal, but hopefully some of you are able to tune in on your lunch break and get a flavour of what we're feeling about how things are going at Tranmere at the moment, because it's been a bit of a mental 13, 14 hours, hasn't it? A defeat to Accrington, followed by Nigel Adkins making his Tranmere departure. 10 games without a win, 7 defeats and 3 draws during that period, leaving Rovers somehow just above the relegation zone by 2 points. How long that will last, I have no idea, but that is the predicament they find themselves in right now. To talk about last night, Will O'Neill, Tranmere fan regular on the podcast, joins us. And I'm also delighted to have Luke Feather from the Liverpool Echo as well. We'll come to you in a moment, Will, but from your point of view, Luke, obviously you've been in and around Nigel Adkins' camp for the last however many months. Did you see it coming last night?
I mean, on the balance of things, I think there's been a few performances over the last couple of months where you do sort of think, is this going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? The defeat at home to Colchester, the loss on New Year's Day at Morecambe. I think you could sort of say the writing's been on the wall for a while. And it has got, I mean, I was still surprised by it when I saw the news that he'd left the club, purely for the reason that I didn't think anything would happen until the takeover was confirmed. But I mean, last night it was just the performance levels again not up to the standard that they need to be. Yes, we might have been unlucky to lose things on reflection, because Accrington weren't great either. It was a really, really poor quality game, to be honest. Neither side really deserved to win. But I mean, it's as I said before, it's sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, and it was definitely time to make a change.
It had to happen, right, Will?
Yeah, Matt, I think you and I are both in agreement here. I think it probably should have happened a long time before now. I think the chairman has got particular egg on his face after the statement that he came out with, publicly backing the manager and saying basically he's going nowhere. And I think also, I just think at the moment, everything Mark Palios does is just a bit of a PR disaster. Even the statement last night, he got around to blaming injuries and various kinds of things. The excuses are all wearing thin. We've gone through Nigel's failings ad nauseam. You and I have, you and pretty much every one of your guests on the pod has done the same. But last night was baffling. In the end, the goal came from an attacking player being played in a defensive left wing back position, getting a toe on a ball that was the centre half's ball all night long, and we conceded the only goal of the game. But I think that papers over the cracks a lot. I think Accrington had 2 golden opportunities. The one in the first half where O'Connor gave the ball away, and the one in the second half where they passed it through us. And I mean, he's got to score that. He's got the whole goal to aim at, and he missed the target. If we'd lost 3-0, you couldn't really have complained. So I am fully convinced that this team is getting relegated, which is why I texted you last night, Matt. I think last night I think we all suspected it, but I just don't see where. Not only I don't see where the wins are coming from, I just don't see where the goals are coming from in this team at all. I think that midfield, obviously you can leave Garrett out because he's a young lad who's come in, but Merry's never scored a goal for us. Finley's never scored a goal for us. Davison has scored 2 goals, one of which was in the Pizza Cup, I think, and the other one was a cross against Swindon. Connor Wood's never scored a goal for us. Davis hasn't scored one this season. You go throughout the team, and with the exception of Connor Jennings, there's just no goals in it at all. And you got the feeling we could have played on until Easter last night and we wouldn't have scored. So, yeah, I think the manager had to go. I think there are such fundamental problems with this team, and I don't know who's going to take over. But I just think we're at the point now where, I've said this, but with the exception of Ian Dawes, I would take any manager out there available, because I just think we are in dire straits. But I'm
John
afraid
Barnes?
whoever comes in now, I genuinely, I think it's too late, and I'm afraid that we will get relegated at the end of the season.
Well, that was a question that I was going to come to very shortly, but you've touched on something that I want to put to both of you there, really, which is the lack of responsibility that seems to be out there at the moment. A 10-game winless streak does not happen because of goalkeepers playing well against you every week or because of a significant number of injuries or suspension. Yes, you can go on a little streak and that happen, but at some point you turn it around and you get a result, regardless of players being out injured. And I know Tranmere have been missing some seriously important players. Brad Walker hasn't played since that ridiculous substitution of coming on at Morecambe, and before then he'd barely played for a few months. Hendry hasn't played that much football since I think October because of injury. We know that Luke Norris has barely been available, and Sol Solomon is currently out, and they are big players. But at some point, you do find a way of winning, regardless of injuries. And actually, you also have to look inside and say, well, why are these injuries happening? Is it something to do with our training, our strength and conditioning? What is it down to? So I just feel like there's a real lack of collective responsibility for why results have gone wrong. There seems to be a lot of excuses being made, Luke, for things that the manager ultimately carries the can for.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it there, but the injuries can only account for so much, as you say. I mean, they have been very unlucky with injuries, but if you look across the leagues, not just in League Two, but League One, a lot of teams are suffering injuries, and none have been on this, or not many have been on this run of form that Tranmere have been on. I mean, I sympathise in some ways in that one of the key strengths from when Adkins first came in, when he first got given the permanent job, was he was able to pick a consistent team, and they looked solid because he had the same back four. He had Hendry and Walker in midfield, and they were difficult to break down on the most part. I know there was a couple of games where it was a bit easier and where that consistency had gone, and he's not really had that this year. Now that's not making excuses, because, as you say, it comes to a certain point where he has to figure something out, and the defensive mistakes that have been happening, you can't just put that down to fortune or lack of it. So yeah, I agree. There's been a bit of a sort of excuse-making sort of culture that started to creep in, like you touched on, Will, before, with the statement that Palios put out a couple of weeks ago. He's sort of blaming these injuries and bad fortune, and it comes to a point where you do have to take responsibility.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But again, I'm just baffled that it's taken this long. I know that they're friends, and like a lot of people, I suspect that Nigel was holding out for some kind of payoff. But I mean, it's got to a point where we look like we're never going to win again under that manager. But I'm left absolutely bewildered by the tactics, by the substitutions, by it is Luke, as you're saying, it's accountability. And I think with this manager and the fact that his entire career he's been an arm round the shoulder, kind of everything's going well kind of manager, there's been no accountability at any point. We have not been good enough. We are the worst attack in the league. We've got the third or fourth worst home record in the league, and we've lost 10 straight away from home. I cannot understand how bad we are. I saw a Morecambe fan tweet something last night, and I think he was saying that this has to be the worst bottom three in the history of League Two, because we are dreadful and there's still two teams below us. I thought Carlisle might have a bit of a turnaround, because I know they spent big, but they look just as bad as ever they were. It's so upsetting. Last night I was, after the initial euphoria of him being sacked, I was so frustrated by the whole thing. Why didn't this happen ages ago? Why didn't we have any money at all to spend in January? Why did we bring in 3 kids, one of whom we've never seen? The other one, I mean, it summed up Tranmere's season that Mather's first contribution was that free kick, which he thought he'd take over from our own half and hit the first man. It's an absolute car crash of a season. And the other thing that you have to look at is that we must have a comfortably bigger budget than Accrington did last night. And they signed a lad from Curzon Ashton in National League North, and he just dominated Davison, played him out of the game. Davison, I mean, that is a whole podcast to itself. That twat, pardon my French, I probably shouldn't have said that, but that guy has been an absolute shambles. If he is rumoured, if the rumours are true, and he's one of the highest earners at the club, a guy who has scored one tap in and one miss-hit cross, a big lad who cannot get off the floor to win a single header. How many positive things? He did one pass that I thought was half decent last night, but how he stays in the team week after week is absolutely baffling. I mean, Christian Dennis did more in 20 minutes than Josh Davison did in the whole time he was on the pitch. And I do think that Nigel has not helped himself with any of the tactical and selection decisions that he's made. I'm so frustrated. I'm so upset about the whole thing. I feel that we had to fight so hard to get out of non-league. It was such a struggle. We were there. I'm sure you were there, some of them as well, Matt. We were going away to places like Boreham Wood and Braintree and Guiseley. We were going away to these places week after week. We saw some horrific things, and we fought, and we got a team spirit, and we came back up, and the club looked to be heading in the right direction again. And I think to take us down to the National League is unbelievable negligence on the part of the chairman. And that is absolutely at Palios' door that I lay the blame for all of this. Yes, it was time for Nigel to go, but it was time for him to go arguably after we lost to Oldham in the cup. So, yeah, I'm lost for words. Even though I've just said a lot, I feel lost for words because it's just, I'm so frustrated. I'm so upset.
Yeah, I'm not entirely convinced you are lost for words, Will. I don't think you ever have been. But it is interesting, and we will get on to the question of what next or who next in a moment or two. But it could have happened ages ago, and that's the thing that I think really irks a lot of Tranmere fans. You say after the Oldham game in the FA Cup, Will, and I think I'm inclined to agree. That's probably for me the straw that broke the camel's back. But since then, things haven't improved greatly. Have there been 2 league wins since then? The one against Harrogate and the one against Carlisle have obviously been 10 successive away defeats, which is almost unprecedented in the club's history. I think 12 is the club record, and they might get close to that, although hopefully a change of manager means they won't. It could have happened. And then, only 3 weeks ago, the chairman was publicly backing Nigel Adkins after a 5-game winless run, which since has become 2 points from the last 5 matches. It just feels like a lot of time has been wasted, Luke.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, the Oldham game was another one, as you both just mentioned there, where a decision could have been made on the manager. I think not just for defeat, to lower league opposition, but the manner of the defeat as well. If memory serves, I think in the second half, Oldham were comfortably the better team and looked like the only team that were going to go on and win the game. You could argue that even at the end of last season, it would have been a good time. I know, obviously, the contract that was given to Nigel when he was made the permanent manager meant that he was never going to leave at the end of last season, but that probably would have been sort of the wiser thing. I know hindsight's 2020, but I mean, looking forward, you've just got to think that whoever comes in now can just sort of stick a rocket under the players and just sort of, I don't know, pull the limited resources that they have got together and just sort of dig in, because it did just start to look like the players were, as soon as we go a goal down, the heads drop, the shoulders drop, the body language is all off. So you've just got to hope that whoever can come in now can sort of reignite the flame and say, come on, we've got how many games left? Is it 13 games left or 12, 13 games to save your Football League status? Because a lot of them at the minute, I know a lot of them are out of contract. A lot of them are playing for the Football League careers, really. Because, there's not been too much of contracts at the minute, understandably, with the takeover and things, but you wouldn't imagine that many of them are doing themselves many favours to earn a new contract here or anywhere else in League Two. So there's incentives for all of them if the incentive of keeping Tranmere in the Football League isn't enough for them, which it should be, of course.
But they just that's the worry, is that it looks like they don't care, and I know that they're professional footballers, and they must care. They must hate going into their families after another defeat. They must hate the abuse they get off the crowd. But it looks to us as supporters like they're just not that bothered. And I look across that team, and again, we always say this, but Connor Jennings is exempt from this. Yes, he's not the player he was, but with his the word is overused, but with his legendary record at Tranmere, that is deserved. 250 appearances, a goal and an assist in 2 promotions. Whatever happens this season does not deserve to happen to that man. I've said it before, and I will say it every time. But take Connor out of that team. How many of these players look like they actually care for the shirt? How many of these players would anyone in League Two take off our hands? Someone like Davis or Turnbull, yeah, they might get a gig with like Newport or Harrogate or Bromley next year. Good luck to them. But I can't see anyone in League Two wanting Chris Merry or Connor Wood or Harvey Saunders or Josh Davison. These are players that already look like non-league players. And again, that leads us to the obvious thing of how appalling has our recruitment been. We have signed a whole load of players who are either poor or injury prone or both. And then in the transfer window, when we were desperate for reinforcements, and a lot of us were thinking, just be in touch in January, just be somewhere where we've got a chance of staying up, and sign 2 or 3 key players. And 100%, if we'd signed 2 or 3 players that could go into the first team, we'd stay up comfortably this season. I've absolutely no doubt about that. And especially, please sign someone that can put the ball in the net. And instead, we signed 3 young kids. I've got nothing against Garrett. He was by far from the worst player last night, but was it what we needed? Was all the stuff about the budget, was there really no money anywhere for us to sign a couple of experienced players to maintain our league status, which we fought so hard to get back? So the recruitment is shocking, and we're paying the price for it now. And as I say, I just halfway through last night's game, even before we went 1-0 down, I was just thinking, where are the goals coming from in this team? How many times did we work the keeper? There was that once a good move. Davison, the only good thing he did, playing Patrick into space, good ball in from the left, Connor Jennings header, and it was a good tip over save. And you thought, great, we created something, press on from here. What did we do after that? Even Omari Patrick we see as one of the I hate to say bright sparks, but brighter sparks this season, perhaps. When he completely bamboozled the fullback, and he's got time and space to look up on the box in front of the cop, just pick out a ball. You've got 3 or 4 players waiting in there, and up completely unchallenged with time in his hands, he just lobs the ball over everyone and out for a throw in. And it's the lack of quality throughout this team which is alarming. Who signed these players? Well, the answer is Nigel Adkins did. Whether he was technical director at the time or he was manager, the recruitment has been abysmal. And if you can't score goals, and if you start shipping a lot of stupid goals, then you end up getting relegated.
Well, hopefully they don't get relegated, but let's talk about what happens next. They've certainly improved or increased their chances, in my opinion, of staying up by deciding to make a change of manager. And it's all a case of what happens next. And I'm intrigued by how quickly an appointment may or may not be made, because if we look at Tranmere's history under Mark Palios, generally, when they have a changed manager, when they've sacked someone, it's taken a few weeks for a new boss to come in. The only exception being when Mickey Adams replaced Rob Edwards, which happened within about a 3 or 4 day turnaround. But if you look at some of the other changes of manager that have been made, obviously, when Mickey Adams left, there was an interim until the end of the season, and then Gary Brabin takes charge in the May time, so a 2 or 3 week turnaround. When Brabin gets sacked, there's a 3 week period or 2 week period when Paul Carden is in interim charge. When Mellon leaves, it's left until Mike Jackson eventually takes the reins, maybe 4 or 5 weeks later. When Jackson leaves, obviously Dawes and Parkinson take charge for 5 games, and then you've got Keith Hill coming in. When Keith Hill eventually leaves, you've got the period where Dawes and Parkinson are in charge for the playoffs, and then eventually Mellon returns, but Mellon doesn't return until, I don't think it might well be July, possibly mid-June. When Mellon leaves, Dawes gets put in interim charge for 8 games and then gets the job permanently. And then when Dawes gets sacked, Adkins gets an interim period in charge before getting the job permanently. So history tells us that when Mark Palios sacks a manager, he generally doesn't have someone lined up to come in and take the reins. If Tranmere are to be in a similar position this time around, where it's 3-4 weeks and another 3-4-5 games pass by before a manager is appointed, I think that that's too late. If you look at other clubs, if we take Everton as an example, Moyes was in within 2 or 3 days of Sean Dyche going, and that they're not the only club that do that. Look, I know there are, Man United had Van Nistelrooy in temporary charge until Amarin came in, so it does happen. But the predicament that Tranmere are in, you need to move fast. I think I'm right in saying, Luke, before you run out of time, someone has got to come in. If not before Port Vale, then certainly before next week.
Absolutely. If the more time that a new manager's got in to implement his own ideas and to try and, build that relationship with the players and get them playing again, the better. You can't, as I said before, when there's 12 or 13 games remaining, you can't afford to hang around. You need to act fast. The problem is that there's only 6 home games left. If you sort of eliminate away games, because the last 10 games have showed that you can't rely on the away games to pick your points up. So naturally, you look to your home games, but the home form's not been there either. 6 home games to go. You look at the last few that have been. Last night, MK Dons, Colchester, Gillingham. At the time, I know Colchester have sort of done okay since, but at the time they were all sort of teams that were struggling for form a little bit, and they've all come away with something, at least a point. So, I mean, the sooner they get a manager in, the better. If they can set up to not lose, which sounds bizarre to say when you've only got six home games left, but if you can set up to not lose against Port Vale and sort of take a point and a decent performance, hopefully, but I mean the performance is sort of secondary at this point. You just need the points. If they can get a point against Port Vale and look to build on from that, then hopefully that can give them a degree of confidence. I thought they would take some confidence from, all right, they lost against Notts County, but they were the better team for a lot of that game, and they created some good chances. If it wasn't, for a man of a match performance from the goalkeeper and the centre back, they might have taken a point from the game. I don't think Notts County were brilliant. But I thought Tranmere looked bright at times. I thought they might have taken some confidence from that into last night, but that didn't transpire. So yeah, as you say, the quicker they move now, the better. I think it's been massively delayed in taking action in the first place, so they can't afford to delay anymore.
Well, I don't know if you've seen this, guys, but Julia Boll put out a tweet this morning to say that apparently the club are moving extremely quickly and that candidates were approached before 9 o'clock this morning. So it may well be exactly, you're absolutely right. We need someone in straight away, but it may well be that the club is working to get someone in immediately, whether that is on a short-term basis or whether it's if you keep us up, you've got the chance of a contract. I don't know. It is tricky because obviously we don't know what the new owners want, and we don't know whether there was any input from the new owners, whether they've actually said, look, enough is enough, we don't want this guy in charge. But it was that I thought that tweet was very interesting, that presumably she has a lot of contacts that I don't have, and that she is aware that the club have spoken to people this morning and that talks are underway. So it would be great if we could get someone in before Port Vale, but certainly even if there's an interim manager for Vale and before, is it Bradford the next game? I'm not sure. But yeah, before that, I think we may see someone in very quickly. And let's be honest, if we get any kind of new manager bounce, it will help at the moment.
Well, we'll see what happens. Luke, I know that you've got to leave us, so thank you very much for your time this afternoon, as it is now, but really appreciate you coming on to give your thoughts. So thank you very much for joining us on the A Trip to the Moon podcast. We'll stay on the line because we'll have a little chat then in terms of who you think could be the new manager. There are loads of names being floated around. Ryan Lowe, being one of them by TalkSport this morning. Paul Ince is a name being tipped up by some people. I've seen links to Ronnie, well, not links, but people mentioning Ronnie Moore and Steve McNulty and whoever else. Who is it that you would like to see come in?
I think Ryan Lowe would be the dream, isn't it? The question is whether he would work with Mark and whether he would want to take charge of a team that risk falling out of the Football League. I think the only reason that a manager of that caliber would be interested in us is if he were able to speak to the new prospective owners and have certain guarantees about what the future might hold next season in the National League. I think he'd be a solid appointment. At this point, I think that I was only tongue in cheek for when I said anyone apart from me and Dodd, but there's a part of that that's true, because I think most managers would come in now and would take a look at the club and the mess that it's in and would think this is unacceptable. And I do feel that some of these players might benefit from a proper rollicking off the manager. I just think that some of them need to hear certain home truths. Maybe it's disappointing that the senior players, such as Finley, Davis, Turnbull, aren't already doing that, because it's not okay what we're seeing. So maybe we do need someone that will come in and rant and give us a short-term shock. But at this point, even someone like John McGreal, someone that I would have taken over Nigel Adkins, somebody that has just got some fresh ideas, obviously would care about the club, a local guy. But yeah, I think of the names you mentioned, Matt, I think you probably agree that Ryan Lowe would appear to be the outstanding candidate if we could get him to sign on to some kind of project.
I think from the names I've seen, he would. I wouldn't mind taking a look at someone like Liam Richardson, who I think has done very well in the past. But it's a case of whether you can tempt managers of that particular caliber down to the wrong end of League Two. I mean, Ryan Lowe was managing in the Championship at the start of this season, so that is a huge drop from Preston to Tranmere. You say that it's a tough job to take on, or it's not a particularly attractive job. I think it is. I think you can come in to Tranmere, and I think there's a lot you can change very quickly that will get results improving. And I think, therefore, if you're looking at it as a manager, you can go, they're 2 points above relegation now. They've got 13 games left. I can come in and I can probably earn myself a bonus by keeping them up, because it's not going to take much to tinker with the side to make them a more attacking outfit and a team that can win more games. And therefore, you get the win on your CV of being the manager parachuted into a club in February or March and saving them from relegation to the National League. As I've put on social media, I know of at least one manager who is now in work, but at that point was out of work, who floated himself to Tranmere a few weeks ago and basically didn't get a response. I know that's not what you want to see behind the back dealings, but it's football, and that's what happens. And I just look at that team now and I think of the side that we saw last night, you've got Amari Patrick, your top scorer, playing as a wing back, as a defender, basically. And he makes the mistake for the goal, but should he really be in that position in the first place? You've got Josh Hawkes, who can score goals and can create goals, who sat on the bench or in the stands for most of the season. You've got Regan Hendry now returning from injury. You've hopefully got some other options elsewhere in the field. You've got two players from Manchester United on loan who you've barely used. There's options within that squad to change it around and make it a more attacking side. And I think if I'm looking at that as a manager, I'm thinking, do you know what? I can go in there and I can save them from relegation. And I think that's why it is quite an attractive job. It's not like you're looking at a squad that is down to its absolute bare bones. I mean, Williams is another one who could come into that team and make a difference in midfield potentially. There are options you can have to make it different.
Well, you sold it to me, Matt. I mean, I might throw my CV in. It's, and to be fair, I wouldn't do any better. I wouldn't do any worse than Nigel's been doing over the last few weeks. I think this is something that I did want to discuss with you. I mean, the Josh Hawkes thing I find absolutely mystifying. I just don't know whether it's something personal. I just don't know why Nigel just hasn't given him a chance. And I by giving him a chance, I don't mean throwing him on for 6 minutes at the end of the game. I mean, start the guy for 5 games. Surely, you've seen last night, as soon as he came on, within 2 minutes, he got the ball in a dangerous position down the right. And one look up, You look on the replay. I was watching on Sky, obviously, and you look at one look up, and straight away he sweeps the ball into Dennis's feet, who shot over the bar. We had another moment where Hawks got on the end of an Omari Patrick cross, and okay, he headed it wide, but you just think at least he was in the right place. This is a guy who will create goals and score goals. And I do genuinely think it's one of Adkins' most criminal decisions this season to dispense with one of our most dangerous goal threats. So in that respect, you're absolutely right. If I were a new manager, I put on Twitter this morning 5 things I would do immediately to change the team, and one of them is just play Josh Hawks for every game now. Absolutely, I would drop Josh Davison and play Christian Dennis. I thought Dennis was okay for 20 minutes. At least he's got a footballing brain. The legs may have gone, but at least he can hold the ball up. At least he looks for runners and options. I'd stop playing 5 at the back. I think 5 at the back and 3 defensive midfielders when you're playing Accrington at home. What is that about? So I do feel you're right. I do feel that there are some fundamental changes. And in a way, I'm glad that you said that, because it's a more optimistic outlook than I've had. As I said to you, I'm so upset and I'm so frustrated at the way things have gone over the last, I was about to say 20 games, but arguably over the last 3 seasons, let's be honest. That maybe you're right. Maybe someone could come in and just think, yeah, there's things I can do with this team. The other thing that I do wonder is, are there any free agent players that we could potentially sign? Is that something we could do? Could we possibly bring in a player who's out of a club at the moment? Because again, certainly up front, there must be something better out there than what we have on the pitch at the moment.
Send out the bat signal to Usman Kane. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, maybe. Mustafa Tiriaki?
Oh, dear. There have been some terrible strikers. I know Kane was a midfielder, but there have been some terrible strikers in Greece, Prenton Park, haven't there? I think, for me, the biggest insult last night was bringing Sam Mather on after 90 minutes. I mean, what is the point? What is the point? If you're chasing a game and you're 1-0 down, you don't make subs in the 90th minute or tackle, unless it's the absolute last throw of the dice. You make it earlier. And I just think the use of the squad and the bench for me has been what has really held Tranmere back this season, and is the sole reason, in my opinion, behind where they are in the table, because there's been a clear refusal to use certain players in their correct positions or play a formation that suits the players, and it's damaged. And if you hold, I don't know if there is a grudge, but if you hold a grudge against a player, sometimes you've just got to put that to one side for the good of the team and for the good of your job.
Yeah, I mean, what is baffling is when you looked at him and you just think, he's managed in the Premier League. It's absolutely bizarre this season. He looked clueless. Like again, another interaction I had on Twitter a few weeks ago was a Scunthorpe fan who was obviously loved him and was saying, "Oh, we kill to have him back now." And our fans were saying, "You really wouldn't." Like his best, his best days are behind him, and I find it absolutely bizarre. So many of his decisions are fairly basic things that he's getting wrong. It's yes, we've still got a chance of staying up. We have. You're right. I can't be as fatalistic as maybe I have been, because there are 13 games left and we're not technically in the bottom 2. But for me, the issue is, where are the goals going to come from? That's the thing that gets me more than anything else. And yes, I do think Josh Hawks could help with that. Maybe Regan Hendry could help with that as well. But who up top is going to put the ball in the net for us? And that's why I said I would give Christian Dennis a run of games, because at least he has a proven record of scoring in the Football League. Davis and Saunders should not be anywhere near that team for the rest of the season. Maybe give Saunders 5 minutes at the end if we're holding on for an away win. Wouldn't that be nice? And you give Harvey 5 minutes just to harry the opposition, and just when the tired legs and stuff. But aside from that, I wouldn't have the two of them anywhere near the team to the end of the season.
Holding on for an away win. I've forgotten what that feels like. It seems like an absolute lifetime ago that Tranmere won an away game.
You might see it at Woking next year.
Well, I mean, that's what I want to conclude on, really, is how much faith do you have Tranmere will stay up? For me, it's an absolute miracle that they remain above the bottom 2. And it's a sad endorsement of how bad Morecambe and Carlisle have been this season, that Tranmere are still 2 points above the relegation zone. And I know Morecambe in particular had a lot of off-the-field problems that are still ongoing. But Carlisle have signed a whole new team basically in January, and they still haven't picked up, and it's a mystery to me, but maybe Mark Hughes will turn them around. Tranmere have now finally rolled the dice. Do you think they will avoid relegation to the National League?
I don't, Matt. I've said it a couple of times, and despite your convincing me not to be quite as negative, I don't. I don't see that team scoring enough goals to stay in the league. Because at some point we're going to need to win some games. I know last night was only I think it was our 5th home defeat of the season, but there are 8 draws in there. And some of those draws were, let's face it, were absolutely diabolical. You look at teams that have left Birkenhead with something this season, Salford were terrible, got a point. Swindon were awful, got a point. Grimsby were embarrassing and left with 3. Accrington weren't great last night, but I think they should have won by more than 1 goal. Fleetwood were bad. MK were bad. We failed to beat any of these teams. And the thing that really gets me is I don't see where the goals are coming from. I just don't. I think even people talk about the Fleetwood and MK Dons. There was a spirit there. Notts County, there was a spirit there. They're getting the team back, but we scored 1 penalty and 1 goal when we were already 2 down out of the last 4 games. And for me, that is unfortunately that's what's going to take us down, regardless of anything else. But I hope I'm wrong. I hope that someone can come in and give the players a rocket. As I say, I hope that Josh Hawkes gets a run every game now to the end of the season, because he's one of the few players I think will actually create something for us, have a bit of a spark. And I really hope, as much as I hope for me and you and all the other fans, I really hope that Connor Jennings doesn't end up with the relegation on his CV, because he absolutely doesn't deserve it for what he's been for the club and what he still is. So I'm hoping against hope that I'm wrong, but judging by what I've seen this season and the total lack of goal threat from 90% of our players, I don't see how this team stays up, frankly.
Well, I have more confidence than you, but it all depends on who comes in as the replacement. If you make an absolute damp squib of an appointment, if you give it to Crosby, then that to me would just be like, what's the point of sacking the manager in the first place? But if you can get the right man in and give him the rope to make the decisions that he needs, then I think there's every chance at this step, because Morecambe are not great. Carlisle, there is a bit of a gap down to Carlisle, which is helpful. And it's only probably going to take 4 or 5 wins from the final 13 games, which is quite a lot. It's basically nearly doubling Tranmere's tally for the season. But if you can get that, then you've got every chance of avoiding the drop. And look, fingers crossed by rolling the dice. As I say, I think they've given themselves more of a chance of staying up, but let's hope the right man comes in, and let's hope he comes in quickly. Let's leave it there. Thank you to all of you for joining us on this live stream. It's been great to see so many people commenting, but also so many people watching and giving up some of your lunch hour to keep in touch with us. So really appreciate your support and your eyeballs. We'll be back tomorrow on the actual podcast. If you go to triptothemoonpod.co.uk, you'll be able to hear our news show. Derek Jones is one of the guests on that. I've spoken to him about his interview with Nigel Adkins last night, but also his feeling from around the club in recent weeks and months. So Derek Jones will be a guest tomorrow morning. That news show will be out at 7:30. And then, of course, we'll be here with a review of the Port Vale game on Sunday. And if you are looking to put a smile on your face, please do go and listen to the interview I did with Ned Kelly, talking about scoring at Wembley for Tranmere 25 years ago tomorrow, that League Cup final at Leicester. It was a joyous moment for all of us, but for Ned, it was one of particular euphoria, and it was great to relive it with him. So go and listen to that. You can subscribe for £3 a month and get access to all our exclusive content and our lengthy back catalogue of interviews with many, many ex-players. Thank you for watching.